He's a little wired today. All right, so here's Kitty. She's got her top off. Hope that doesn't embarrass any of you. There's a 580 motor. It's actually doing really well. This is my issue here, this clutch. You can't see it now, but that is a Polaris clutch. The belt's Polaris, but that doesn't matter so much. The problem is it doesn't seem to engage correctly. After talking to an Articat guy, I guess that's a 340 clutch for Polaris, which means it's not clutched correctly for this motor, which means it engages light and it doesn't grip right. It's a spare belt. So I'll show you what that means for driving and why I'm going to replace it. Alright, so Kitty's running now. She's very noisy. Now you'll notice when I go to move, where are the dogs? Meal, Jack, Chewy, Jack. Okay. Oh, well, serves me right. Here we go. So we go to move. It's engaging right around 3,000. But she has trouble moving. Once I get up to 4,000, she goes. So 3,000 slow, it should be 3,800 to 4,200 according to the web. And the fact that it's engaging low is a sign that it's engaged too lightly. Now the problem with that is, when I get up to anything that requires torque, the gearing's not right, the power's not there, so it just stalls out and won't move. Which is something I've experienced a lot. There's Emil running with me. Emil's trying to figure out what I'm doing. Good. Alright, so I shown, I don't know if you could hear any of what I was saying, but it's engaging at 3,000, between 3,000 and 3,200. Should be engaging at 38 to 4,200. So with it engaging at the wrong RPM, I'm not getting the torque out of the engine. It's not geared correctly for the torque. And I have trouble getting up into what I call the high gear. That's when I'm going along and it hits that high note. And this thing takes off so hard, it lifts off. Actually, it has lifted off before. So it's got oodles of power, it's just not geared right. And that comes down to that clutch being the wrong clutch, I think. So I've got a test run of what it looks like with the Polaris clutch on it. I've got an Articat clutch to put on it that should be matched to this engine. And we should see improvement in drive. Alright. First things first is to get the old belt off. Shouldn't be impossible. Ugh. Ow. Come on. I'm now moving the entire thing backwards. There you go. Old belt off. Next thing is going to be to remove this cap so that I can gain access to that nut. Try going reverse. Reverse thread. Alright, so we got that nut off, or that bolt. Where did I put the bolts? Because I was playing with it. Put it down. Here it is. It's a big one. Problem with this bolt, or with this, is that there's a tapered hole there, or tapered shaft. The hole's tapered. So to tighten it down, it wedges it on so it doesn't come off. Problem is getting it off is a pain. I have a couple ideas on how to get off without the proper puller. The pulley pulling set does not account for this, so I have to make something work. Okay, so this is Happy Sammy. She's happy because finally we got the clutch off. We didn't have a puller, so if you look at the clutch, I beat the tar out of it trying to hammer it off, because it is possible, I've been told, but not by me today. We didn't have a proper puller because none of those pullers fit. What was interesting is I had this old puller, which I think is from U-Pops, and it matched the threads on the inside of that clutch just by happenstance. So we tightened it down. We gave her heck, and she broke herself loose. Now, as you can see, it's getting dark. We didn't spend this whole time doing this. We had a visitor. Our neighbor came up to see us. So we're going to get back to trying to get this done today. And I'm glad that we got it off, because that means we'll have a working snow machine again. All right, love yous. So we got the belt on, clutch is on, exhaust is back in place. Just got to put the springs in. To do that, I need the needing those pliers, which they have vanished, which happens while working sometimes. So I'll come back to them when we're firing up. Alright, so the first impression I got of this is actually kind of unique. This belt is sitting up on here. When the other belt was in, it sat embedded, which was almost like it was too tight. Just having a larger gear there is going to be more torque, I think. Everything does seem to line up correctly. Everything went together the way it seems to, or it seems to need to. Next step is cranking her over. Alright, we're getting ready to crank it over. Sammy's real happy. Now, we'll see if the difference. Now, I expect it to engage closer to 4,000 RPM, which should give it more power when she goes. We'll see. It's stone dead cold, so it can take, I don't know, 30 or 40 pulls to start. It might take one, who knows? Oh. Took it off choke too soon. What's happening here, which is hard to make out, just me screaming and getting excited, is when we were driving it before, we would reach 5,000 RPM and it's like the engine suddenly got a burst of power and it'd take off. Sometimes it'd lift up. I called it the high gear. And it was only 5,000 RPM and it was very rare that we actually hit it. It was not a consistent thing. Definitely if we had any weight on it, would not get up into that high gear. And that was a problem to us because then we would get stuck on hills. We didn't have enough to go pulling our groceries and stuff. So when I went and took off, the very second I took off, it was hard to tell from the video, the track gripped so fast that it spun out underneath me a little bit and it lifted up the front end of the snow machine. Now, that happened at 4,000 RPM, so 1,000 RPM then lower than it normally would, which means I'm getting way more power at a lower end than what I did before. So the difference between the Polaris old clutch and this clutch is massive. The power it has now is what we've been looking for. It's what we knew this machine had. And the motor's good. It's always been good.
once I did all the work on the carbs and stuff. Now we're actually seeing it because the clutch is using the power correctly. It's taking off quickly. It's a different machine right now. I don't know what that means long term for this thing, but I mean, we'll see tomorrow how it does with pulling logs, but I'm pretty excited about it.